It's almost bedtime.
I be in the podcast too, though.
You've been on the podcast, huh? What do you want to say? I'll put you on the podcast. What do you want to say?
Booty.
I'm away.
Bye bye.
Hello and welcome to Table for Five with No Reservations. Take a seat at the table for a fresh, sweet, salty, tart, and pleasantly bitter conversation. Hello, and thank you for taking a seat at the table. This is the No Reservations episode to our Voices Behind the Bloggers series. So tonight we thought we'd talk a little bit about why we share and have like kind of a fun chat about that and the ups and downs of sharing to wrap up this series. And we're so grateful for all the guests we had come on. With me at the table tonight, I have Tabitha.
Hello.
Rachel.
Hey, everybody.
Kim.
Hi there.
Jen.
Hi, everyone.
And I am Jamie. I thought we could go around and kind of maybe talk about some of the questions that we gave the other bloggers. You guys probably know us a little more unless you're pretty new to the podcast. If you are, welcome. But just giving like a little bit more about like, this is how we all met because we all were bloggers at the time. And we obviously also share here on the podcast. So some people might wonder why we do that and why we are so open about our lives. And so, yeah. So our first question to them was why we started to share and why we continue to share. Does anyone want to talk about that?
I write about Celie on a page called Flanaville, and I am proud to podcast here because I feel like it's easier for me to control teachable moments in the calm. Like in the calm after the storm, I can write about it. Maybe I can impact people. Like on Monday nights, I record with my friends about these topics so that I can validate other moms. I try and share information about resources or what it's like as Celie's mom so that because I know what it's like to be so alone. So to me, like alone in a room, alone in a room full of people, alone in a house for years on end where you can't leave because even cars aren't safe. Like it's just a way for me to have touch points with people. I've built community this way. And in being a resource to other people, I've really obviously I found you guys. I think in looking for resources in writing, you become a resource. I mean, it's just been fulfilling.
Yeah.
And I think it's impacted Celie for the better. She knows that she has a story to share and that I think it builds her pride. She really says, like,
Hi, guys.
Mom, thanks for changing the world. Like she's proud of us. I think that's cool.
I used to love, I don't know if she does as much anymore, but when you would do videos and she would like end it, what would she say? Like,
Hi, guys.
Well,
It's Felix channel.
it was like,
yeah.
yeah,
Hey
like a
guys,
YouTube
it's Celie's
skit.
channel. And then it like the YouTubers, she's like
Yeah.
Flana Girl out right at the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah. Flana
It
girl
was
out. Yeah.
But she's
yeah.
into it. It's like performance art and a case study and all that is us.
No, I love that. And I don't know, Celie's a little star. My kid isn't like that. I mean, I'm not saying that my kid is a star in his own right, but he has no desire. He's like, back off, like only
I
when he's
mean,
into
we
it.
certainly have gone through phases. If you started early on Planaville, you saw lots of bronzer, lots of full makeups. Now it's different like activities, but yeah, she's a ham. I mean, she loves it. She's like, "Did you want to take my picture? I'm dressed like a turkey." Oh, perfect. I'd love to take your picture.
Jen, what about you? Why did you start to share? Why do you continue to share?
Well, I'm going to say first reason I did share was because one of our friends we had on that we've interviewed, Kate Swenson from Finding Cooper's Voice, I mean, we all found each other through her. And I don't know, I kind of just got inspired one night. I just started a page, and for me it was kind of just an outlet, really, to be honest. That's why I started. I could kind of talk about all the things that I didn't talk about in my real life with people that didn't know any I didn't know anything about autism, and nobody in my life did. So it was kind of my little place to vent about things, talk about things. And then as my page grew, then it was sort of just telling our experiences. And I think for me, it's like getting the messages and, connecting, like Rachel, building a community and sort of having your own little place to tell your story. Kaya is now 13 and she is very much, if she used to be like that with the camera, she would always pose. Now it is her mood, it depends. So when she wants to take a picture, I'll take 10,000, but I don't dare get in her face with a camera anymore. So that part's changed a little. Yeah, it's just that whole not feeling so isolated.
Yeah, 1000%. What
Yeah.
about you, Tabs?
I think the same. Mine was like an outlet for my feelings, really. At first, it was kind of to like write and dump all the feelings that I was having at the beginning, mainly for myself. And then that kind of escalated and moved. And then I used to do the interviews with other parents on Wednesday nights on my page, which I really liked.
Those are good.
Yeah, and that was kind of just my own learning curve, like learning people ahead of me who had been through things that we hadn't been through before and kind of sharing other people's stories who maybe weren't writers. And then did the books with my brother, and that kind of like shifted the landscape of some of the stuff that I put on my page. And I started writing before Nora was diagnosed. So going through that process when I was actually writing, which I don't do much of anymore because I don't have time. But it's kind of interesting to think that starting from like the initial phase of Nixon being diagnosed, then Nora, then this divorce and the move and all that stuff kind of has changed over time of what I have time for, A, and B, like what my page helps me in my own life, really kind of it was, and then just connecting with other people who send you messages about your impact is nice for them too, so but once we started the podcast, it's like the writing kind of shifted a lot because we talk about a lot of the things that we would write about on the podcast. So it kind of dropped off a little bit, my writing, once we started kind of sharing in this platform a bit. And I
Same
just
thing.
don't have time to write anything good. So I mean, if you're looking for something new there, go back to the old stuff. That stuff's good. I mean,
Still
check
good.
it out.
Still good when it comes. That's still
When
good.
it comes, yeah. Nobody.
That is interesting though, because when you said that, I'm like, that's true because like all of our blogs obviously came after our kid's diagnosis, but obviously when you started yours, you didn't know Nora was going to be diagnosed. So that is like a different perspective. You had to go like through that process while having your blog. And I don't know how much you shared on your blog at that time. It was probably something you felt very personal about, but that is kind of interesting because I started following Kate, who Jen was just talking about before my son was actually officially diagnosed. And I thought about writing, but then I felt like weird about writing. And I held a little hope in the back of my mind that he wouldn't be diagnosed.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, I wonder what I would have done if I had written through that process for other people to feel that. So anyway, that just made me think of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because at the time I didn't know that she would still be nonverbal at almost 5. She was going to be turning 5 this month, and she was diagnosed right before her second birthday, which is wild. I mean, that's like 3 years later. So it is pretty crazy, all the things that have happened in that time frame, and to look back at my early writing and some of the emotions that were there that are gone. I mean, they come and go, but not as heavy and all consuming as they were at the very beginning, which is it's like a journal almost for ourselves to go and look back, on the time frames that we've passed, which is nice.
This really is too, the podcast.
Yeah.
It's like a time capsule.
When Tabitha said about going back and looking at the emotions and stuff, I've actually thought about going back and wiping out some stuff because I think that I overshared in the beginning. I mean, you don't realize it's the internet. I mean, of course, it's the internet, but you don't realize the reach that it has and the amount of people that are going to see it. And so, I feel like I've pulled back a little bit in that. I think that you sort of shift it, I think
and I've thought about that too, like now that we're in a small place, a small town, and like the impact of my sharing of my children's life is greater for them, I think, than it would have been in the past, living in a 5 million people city compared to where we live now. So I definitely have been thinking about how to approach that moving forward and what I want to do. It changes your perspective really for them, like how much sharing I'm doing for their own sakes, for what people would read or the parents of people, kiddos that they would be involved with or whatever. So
Yeah,
for sure.
What about you, Kimmy?
So, I mean, I feel like the 3 words that come to mind are advocate, educate, and relate. Like basically is what it is. I just came up with that.
Okay, wrap that.
that was good.
So basically,
That's a
like
t-shirt. T-shirt
that
coming
is
up in-
post.
yeah, get on it, Rachel. So basically, for me, obviously, my journey was a lot different because we didn't have any of this when Alyssa was diagnosed, and even years after she was diagnosed, there was no Facebook, there was no online stuff, there was no relating and finding people in the same situation. Even today, I don't know anybody in my real life, like in person, that is anything like Alyssa. Yes, we know other people with autism, but not her type of autism, not like her. So, it was just very different for me. And what happened with me was I started struggling when Alyssa turned 22. So she turned 22, she, lost all her school services and she moved into adult services. And I really struggled with that when I realized the drop in basically services that she was going to have. And it was kind of happening simultaneously as she was like kind of really growing and like really starting to understand more and become more engaged. So I think it upset me so much because of, that where I felt like, and I still do feel like that because of that, she's not able to really reach her full potential, which just really sucks. And there's really not a lot you can do about it. But like, I'm like, this is crazy. This can't be right. So obviously started looking into things, looking online, joined a few Facebook groups, came across Kate like everybody else, which for me it was really different because for me seen this video of this mom just crying, just devastated and
That was me
I'm
too,
on the
Kim.
other side of the screen going, no, it's gonna be okay. Like it's
Yeah.
gonna this is gonna change and it's not always gonna be like this, I'm thinking so I'm like, what is this Finding Cooper's Voice? I honestly didn't even follow any blog page at all, or even know what a blog page
And
was at
you're
that
like,
point.
you know what, Katie girl, advocate, educate.
I
What's
know,
the
like
third
I
one?
just wanted to reach through and give her a big hug, like it was, and it just brought me
I
back
know.
so fast, And the struggle I was having with Alyssa brought me back, kind of brought up a lot of the old feelings of frustration and sadness and just the unfairness of it all, obviously in a different scope because now it's unfair that she's not going to be able to like access and have these services and get speech and do all the things that she deserves to do that don't matter because her age is just a number. Her age has nothing to do with anything for her. So when I started following Kate, this was way back before Coops Troops, and we would like kind of, people would talk to each other in the comments. So she'd write a piece and would go back and forth, and a bunch of moms would go back and forth. And I would literally write like paragraphs. I'm not even kidding. Like my comments would have like 172 likes because they'd be like, and then in my head, I'm like,
I
I could do
remember
this.
you from your comments on the Finding Cooper's Voice, Kimmy.
I'm like, I could do this. And I started like learning all this stuff that I'm like, wait, this is an autism thing? Like things that I thought were an Alyssa thing, like just random things, like not things that are like really that big of a deal, the grand scheme, but things that I'm like, oh, other kids do this? Like this is wild. And I started really thinking, trying to remember different stuff, but like it's kind of starting to mush together as she's getting older. So I decided to start the page and I was really just gonna go try to like go back in time and like really like just kind of like almost I guess journal in a way everything that she did and try to like remember the order and when things got better and when they were harder and all that. So I started the page. I mean, I didn't like really write much on it in the beginning. I was like kind of scared. And then as I was starting to write stuff, she started like doing all the stuff. She started saying she's completely nonverbal, started saying words, started understanding, engaging, like her retention for things like just everything like literally exploded from 22 to 23. So then I shifted and started writing obviously about all this stuff that she was doing.
They're
And it
not
was
going to
funny because
believe this.
well my brother-in-law came to stay with us and he goes, Alyssa talks? And I'm like, what are you talking about? No, she doesn't talk. Like, what do you mean? But like he never seen her use any words, so it was like I was like, oh, so like other people in our family have no idea that she's doing this because it's like it's just one of those things that there's so many little steps that she took that like it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like you're gonna run and call somebody, but it was like it really added up to a lot of stuff. So I shifted my original plan and started writing, and it literally, I'm not even kidding, like every 3 days I was like, Alyssa's never done this before, and I would write a piece about it. And then I really wanted to, and I still want to, like, so I know that there are moms out there, I wanted people to like kind of be able to see maybe down the road doesn't look like you want initially you would want it to look like, but like it doesn't also look as bad as like people make out to be. Like she literally lives her best life every day. She's
Mm-hmm.
happy. She's engaged, she goes out in the community, like she has a purpose. And I wanted people to be able to see that. And I think for some people, when they're ready, that brings them a lot of comfort. And then I also wanted to rage about the fact that like it's ridiculous that there's no services for adults at the same time
Yeah.
and really kind of
Mm-hmm.
bring awareness to that because people don't realize that. People have no idea, because sometimes you can't really look too far into the future. But I think it's important for people to, understand that so they can start trying to figure that out before 21. So that was like another reason I share. And then as I've done it, it is also therapeutic for me sometimes when something happens, it's kind of big and I'm having heavy feelings and I write about it and I hit post and I get so much encouragement and people that connect with me and people that just say, "Oh my God, it's like you wrote this piece for me." Like, thank you for doing this and knowing that you're making a difference, even if it's a small difference, it doesn't matter. Like there's moms out there that have no support, that have no understanding, that have no family, and sometimes you forget because we're very fortunate to have each other and,
Mhm.
other people in our lives that can understand. And we're very, very fortunate. Like Alyssa, everybody in our family is accepting of her and loves her. And, not every person has that. So I think it's important to give people that, even with the podcast, sometimes we've reached challenges and it's hard and scheduling is hard and it's time consuming. And my husband's always like, even if you guys are reaching one person that's
Oh.
sitting out there alone and, you're making a difference in their lives. And I'm like, nope, he's right. So
Mhm.
that's in a nutshell
Oh, I love that,
why
Kimmy.
I do it.
Kimmy, I mean, we always say this, but like, even when we just went on this last trip, like Kim was like a celebrity because everybody knows Kim. No, but like, because you give such hope, like you writing about your daughter doing all this stuff in her 20s is like so amazing
Mhm.
because we are all told, like, we're basically all told if they're not doing certain things by 5 or 6 up,
Yep.
that's never going to happen. And so the hope that your page gives, it's amazing. And that's why everyone loves you.
Mhm.
Well, thank you.
For me, I s- I mean, very similar to everyone, I started sharing really for like therapeutic reasons and also just to like talk about it. Like it's almost like rationalizing, but that's not exactly what I was doing. I was trying to explain my life to other people. And the funny part about being on a podcast is I'm a much better writer than I am a speaker. Like I think I can say things more clearly when I write it out as opposed to like trying to explain to people who have no clue about this. And so it was easier for me. I mean, one of my very first pieces was like writing about something,
You want
a
my phone?
situation, and my son basically having a meltdown in a Barnes and Noble. Not even a meltdown, I think just kind of being loud and like everyone staring and like
I
in
love
that
that piece.
situation.
I love
I
that
remember
piece you
that
wrote.
piece.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do too.
Mhm.
And it was just so helpful because I think like a few family members read that and then like extended family members. And I think it like really clicked for them, like what my son's
Mhm.
autism meant and like why it impacted me the way it did and why like I was always like kind of warning people or saying I couldn't do things or saying like, hey, we might have to leave or hey, we might have to do this. When I'm pretty sure to them, they were just like, Jamie's just crazy or she's just over the top or she's paranoid, but being like, no, this crap does happen. And so
Mhm.
that's a lot of the basis of where my writing comes from is like the explanation of us, which I was already like doing with people in my life, but almost like too much, where it's like a situation pop up and I'd be like, blah, 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 blah. So like this was like a way for me to do that. I feel like
It controls the teachable moments, right? Like
yes.
so that you can let it out instead of doing that on a neighbor.
And then at the same time, hopefully putting this out there for other moms who felt, because I felt so incredibly alone that I had to be explaining all the time, to almost be like, hey, if you're going through this, you're not alone, which I feel like that's more where my page has moved from. I'm sure my family and stuff still reads my blog, but I don't think it's as much. I think to them, it's
Mhm.
like, oh, Jamie's talking more or writing more, kind of a thing. But that's where, and that's why I keep sharing for other people and for the community. I think a lot of people think I share for like I'm trying to, and sometimes I am, and I'll usually directly ask though for like tips or advice or things like that, which people give me in like comments, which I, as long as it's nice and it's not like crazy, I'm always grateful for. But it's really more of like, hey, this is my life and this is what happens to us. And like, this might sound insane to you, or this might sound dramatic to you, or you might
Mhm.
really relate to this. And if you do, like, I hope it helps you. So that's kind of why I keep doing it.
You want to comment back to those people. Actually, these were statements I'm making about what my reality is. There's no question marks here, and I don't need your stupid advice about melatonin. Thank you. Thank
Mhm.
you.
But I do find that that's a good point, Jamie, that like a lot of it is too is to really show people, like give them an inside look of what our life is like or what
Yeah.
our child's life is like, because people really don't they it's not their fault because it is really hard to understand when you say someone's having a hard day or having anxiety, like they don't understand what you mean. Like even family, like unless they're really right there on the sidelines, they really can't understand the scope of like what our kids go through and what we go through. So yeah, I think that's like a big part of it too, is really just putting it out there for even people that don't necessarily have autism in their lives. So maybe if they see somebody in the store having a meltdown or, whatever it may be, they can, take a second to, realize that like, okay, this kid's not being a brat, or like, I read about
Mhm.
this on Facebook, like, or something.
My
Those are my
boss quietly in his office one day, he said, "Now I know where you got your bruises from." He had read some of my pieces and he said, "I
Mhm.
never really wanted to ask, but because you get bruises, right?"
People make
So
assumptions. Yeah.
yeah. So it was like, ah.
my favorite comments are always like from people who, and that's another thing. I don't want to just share to people who have autistic children or have autism or are surrounded by autism. I want people who have no clue also
Mhm.
to read my stuff. But my favorite comments are, and like one of my aunts in the very beginning, she's like, "You totally changed my view on how I see like children or people
People.
misbehaving in public." Or I'm not misbehaving, she didn't say it that way, but like just her view of that. And I'm like, that's all I really want,
That's
because
it.
that's a big piece for me, is like how people
Mhm.
look at us when we learn about.
Well, I was also going to say that for that exact reason, like, and I said it earlier, I have kind of shifted how I write and thought a lot about taking some early stuff down because I did overshare. And sometimes it would come back to bite me because people would have these sort of already thoughts in their head about her and how she was going to be. And it affected a school situation, so yeah,
It's a fine line for
it
sure
is a
on the
fine line.
sharing.
For
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
That kind of leads to the next question about how your sharing has impacted yourself and has impacted others. And I don't know, for me, it is that what Jen was just talking about. It's that fine line of like people's perception of my child. And I really try to shift my writing more so now, like my feelings about what's going on, or how how really bad I am about like dealing with certain things, and my journey of trying to help my son through things. But it's still
Mhm.
hard, and I think it is a really fine line. But I think I kind of already said, like, I think it really has changed some people's perspective on how they see us. And I don't know, I hope my writing has impacted people for the good, and I really hope it has helped people find like a way out of a little isolation. And
Mhm.
I hope it educates people, like whatever, educate, something, make Kimmy's rap, good stuff.
I know. It was so
And I'm
good.
sure it does, Jamie, because even finding Kate's page for me, it sounds so cheesy, but it literally changed my life. I suddenly felt like I wasn't crazy, although that's still debatable, but it was like people understood, the same people were going through the same things. They had children that
Mhm.
screamed, they had Rachel Flanagan, an aggressive daughter, like things that nobody else in our day-to-day life
Mhm.
experienced, right? So you finally just didn't feel so isolated, even though you don't necessarily, it's the internet, but
Well, and you do feel kind of, I don't know if crazy is the right term, but you do feel like sometimes the end of your rope if you don't have someone to like relate to your parenting. Like all the
Mhm.
neurotypical parents can talk about these things that happen in their parenting landscape, and if you don't have someone to like bounce our experiences off it, you're like, what is happening over here? I don't know if this is,
also
you
our
know.
experiences are
Yes,
so gravely different than a
yeah,
typical child.
that's
So,
what I
and
mean. Yeah.
I've often said, I kind of stopped even saying anything because one, it sounded like I was exaggerating. People would look at me like I had five heads when I would say, Kaya hasn't slept in 72 hours,
Mhm.
or she doesn't eat. What do you mean she doesn't eat? What kid doesn't eat? I remember being at my friend's son's first birthday, and his mom, her mom turned to me and said, "What kid doesn't eat cake? Mine."
Mhm.
She said it to me, right? So you just stop talking, I think, about things, and
Mhm.
that's, I think, where that whole
Well,
isolation sets in.
and I think a big thing for me too is like in all that explaining is like a lot of people with typical children, and in general people without children too, their first response is to blame the parent for the child's behavior.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
not saying that I am not part of like when or why my son has behavior sometimes, because when you have autism you're often more sensitive to things, and like I'm not always the cool cucumber I should be. And so that's hard too, because it's hard talking to other people about that when you feel like you're going to turn around and then behind your back is going to be like, well, he learned that somewhere, or he,
Mhm.
like it's like having friends like you guys or having a community online where I can explain through people, be like, okay, this is why my son is behaving this way. And then also having
Mhm.
people being like, yeah, that's not your fault. That, like I didn't teach my son to do those things, or I didn't not discipline my son. It's just his brain works completely differently.
I remember talking to you guys about anchoring of the furniture because Nixon used to like
Yeah.
take all the clothes out of the drawers and everything off the top of the dresser every time. It wasn't like you can tell your kid, no, please stop taking the things out of the dresser.
Hmm.
And I think it was Jamie who was like, Jesse used to do that all the time. And I was like, oh my God, thank God, because I don't know how to stop this from happening. And now we're screwing which you should screw your furniture in regardless. But I mean, double screwing, like anchoring the stuff with the safety freaking anchors.
Those
Straps,
little
yeah.
IKEA things they give you, not
Do
enough.
not, no, those don't
Mm-mm.
hold our kids. I'm sorry, they don't. But I remember feeling like, oh, thank God someone knows this experience. And I didn't know this
Mhm.
was like a normal trajectory for a neurotypical child with autism, We have similar paths in that way.
Yes.
Well, so Kimmy said, she's like, oh, we didn't have the internet, so you wouldn't see like Nora's doing what Jesse did or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's even like watching our kids
Sure.
together, like you can see so many of the similar like tendencies and like even potty training. I think
Because we have
all of
them
our
to look
kids,
at.
yeah, and all of our kids were potty trained at 4.5 years old. Hey, people with autistic kids out there, 4.5 is the age, not 2 or 3 that the
Yeah.
books tell you. You know what I
Don't
mean?
push
Like
it.
even that's like common amongst all of us that our kids hit that mark
Mhm.
at like 4.5. You know what I mean? It's pretty incredible.
Anybody
Oh, I
else?
know what I was gonna say.
When
I
I-
didn't know anyone that Kaya used to put everything in the sink. Everything went in the sink. And I
Oh,
remember it
also
was
too.
one of the tip-offs for the Christine that I threw out of my house at the audacity of trying to tell me my
Poor
kid had
Christine.
autism. Threw her right out the front door. And she said that's called hoarding. It's a very common trait for autism, but it's like you
Yeah,
don't
but
ever
you
know
didn't think it
anyone's
was
kid that does
typical
that.
until Cooper Swenson was putting everything in the bathtub. And then you're like, oh,
An
well,
aha moment for me, like, because Jesse used to put everything in his bed at night. So we had to
Oh
like
yeah.
start taking everything out of his room. And
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that was like an
Nixon too.
autism. I mean, like
Yeah.
by the time he got diagnosed and everything, that
So
had been
many
off.
things.
And I didn't realize that
Yes.
was an autism thing until I was like, oh, all your kids did that. Like, it's just nice to have
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Nixon used to take all the fruit to bed, mangoes, oranges, limes, like all the round fruit in the house. ended up in
He's
his
like, there'll be
bed.
no making margaritas tonight.
I was like, at least
Taking
shake
these
something a
limes,
little bit
taking
more
these
fun.
oranges, taking these mangoes, they're all coming
I
together.
love that he leaves the bananas. He's like,
Oh
F
no, it's
off
not
those
round,
things. I
not
only get the
round.
round fruit.
Only
I
round.
when I started like connecting with people, that mostly happened during COVID, that people would be like, oh my God, Alyssa gives us so much hope. Like, she's so awesome. And so at first I'm like, oh, thanks. And I'm just thinking people are going to be nice. What are they going to say? You know what I mean? Of course, someone's going to say something nice about your kid, right? And like, then I just kept hearing it and hearing it. And I'm like, oh, I think people like actually mean it. And it was very like, I know this sounds terrible to say, but like, it was very like shocking to me for people to come and like be like, your daughter gives me inspiration. Your daughter gives me hope. And I'm like, how? She's severe autism, nonverbal, like disabled. Like, like I couldn't see it at first, until more and more people were saying it. And, and it's like you guys said earlier, it's like it gives that glimpse into the future that like it's not as dire as sometimes they make it out to be.
But that's what I
And
said too, because you're like, well, I didn't know why anyone would want to follow me because she's an adult. And I said, because she is an adult. So
yeah, because
for
like
us, it's
she
like you've done everything that we're wondering about.
but you know how it goes when our kids lose that, that little kid cuteness,
Yes.
they're not
Yes.
so endearing and so like,
But really, her
I don't know.
story and your
It's
story is like you truly, really never know where this life is going to lead you or where your kids will land. I mean, the fact that she started talking in her 20s, that in itself is just inspirational and inspiring and get like plunks of hope and that she's awesome. But
and don't get me wrong, I think she's freaking
yeah,
amazing.
of
Like,
course.
you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
of
Like
course. Yeah,
I
yeah,
do, and I think she's
yeah.
awesome. But like I'm not used to other people being able to see that. I'm used to
Yeah.
other people being like, "Oh, I'm sorry," or just not really understanding like when I'm like, oh my gosh, she did this or understood this, they're like, oh, that's great. But like you can see in their face, they're like, yeah, like, isn't she like 20 something years old? Like, she should be able to pack a lunch. Why is that a big deal? They don't say it. They're obviously, nice, but like you can kind of see it in their face that they're not really understanding the huge deal
Mhm.
that like this is. So I think that's one of the other things I love about sharing is just that like people really can understand these milestones like it's great to have people understand the hard, but it's also it just something it fills your heart when they can really understand the small milestones, the small barriers that they're constantly breaking, and how big they are in your life or in
To
her
us,
life.
yeah, to them,
And
yeah.
also for our followers too. Like there's a lot of people that are, that have followed for so many years,
Hmm.
so they also get to see our kids'
Yeah,
struggles,
yeah.
but their triumphs and.
And I remember when I first connected with Kate on a Zoom, and then she was like, "Oh my God, I love Alyssa. She's so great." And I'm just like, "Oh yeah, it's the same thing." I'm thinking, okay, And then like she kept saying it, and people like, "She was just talking about Alyssa," and I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, she was talking about Alyssa on her live today." I'm like, she was. And then she's like, one day I talked to her, and she's like, "Alyssa changed my life. She changed my life. Me and Jamie saw her that night on the Zoom. We saw Koopa in her. Like, and she said it changed everything. It changed every way that she thought the future would be, which, I mean, that's so inspiring for me to be able to do that or for her to be able to do that to somebody, for somebody,
Hmm.
So I love that aspect of it now too, that it's like I can kind of give back and be there and give that hope and show her and let her inspire people the way that we never were able to have that because of the time that we came up in.
Hmm. Yeah.
And most importantly, that night you met Jamie. So I don't know.
That's right. That's how the night I met Jamie too.
Most
and
important.
and she was awed by me and Alyssa as well.
I was there in that moment. They were so, Kate was like, "Is that your daughter?" Like everything stopped. Like they were so excited. It was cute.
This is like I've been letting you guys go because it's all so positive, and I hate to be like a dick about it, but I've shared. I'm sorry, the way that sharing has impacted me and others is that I've been able to use the platform to show the fight that we're in. For
Mhm.
us, I live in Minnesota, which is a privilege, considering a lot of other states don't have the resources that we have. But this whole idea of like, we talked about this in one of our first series about mental health, that like the words get help, like it's okay to not be okay and go get help. You need to get help is not really that simple. So, in
Mhm.
the same way in my life, like I'm walking this whole thing of like, oh, your daughter has autism, or oh, your daughter has this diagnosis or that diagnosis. Why don't you go get some services? I mean, shit, even the doctors that we go for opinions from will suggest resources that are not available, applicable, or accessible to us. So, like this whole thing of, getting services or living in a resourced state or whatever, like I've used Planaville to share the fight that we're in because it's just not what it seems. It isn't. I have a kid that I've known the school that she had to be in for years. We had to fight for like 15 different schools to get there. Now, that is an exaggeration, but when I tell you it was 3 years, it's real.
Mhm.
Like, it,
I told you I've never seen anything like it. It's
like
wild.
the Sealy Flanagan story. I'm
Yes.
not kidding you.
Yeah.
I've used the platform to raise at least like rage right to let it out of my soul, but also I've shared it right on every community in my neighborhood or in my metro area, their pages. Like I'm trying to raise awareness to the school district that we're in to like, and I don't care if it looks bad or it arranges like seriously, if the worst case scenario happened because the way that I write, which is that CPS calls, first of all, CPS has called, they close the cases and they can't take my kid anywhere. I've gone to the places that they would take my kid. They cannot take my kid. Like, this has not been an easy path to navigate. And carrying the Flanaville people with me on that journey has allowed me to not feel like I'm going nuts, or at least here, like locally, oh my God, this happened to me, or locally, I've been able to use the platform to fight and like to rage right and to just process and to be validated and really to get resources because there are people when I share it to 54 neighborhoods that say, this is the cop that you need to talk to. And then I find out about a program,
Yeah.
but we
That
have to
writing
know the
stinks.
cops. Like I have to know. I mean, plus I share about my own mental health, which has been an absolute shit show and another journey I'm bringing the people on.
One of the first things that I wrote was I got so pissed about how hard it was to figure out the resources in Arizona.
Yeah.
I'm like, why is this so hard? I understand how to find things on the internet and how to read documents, and I still can't figure this shit out. So then
Yeah.
I just freaking plugged that into a blog post, and I was like, here you go, people. This is how you do it. Here's all the steps. Here's the things that you should do and not do at the same time. But it was really just because I was mad. Yeah.
I have forwarded that actual post to like 3 people. If you're ever going to Phoenix, because Massachusetts, Minnesota, and Arizona are the places to go for services.
Oh yeah, Arizona.
And if you go, you should go to Piece of Autism and then search services Arizona, and that article will cover right the frick up.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was really after the guy at the office told me he wouldn't accept my forms because I wouldn't sign his waiver. And then I politely told him I was an attorney and that I wasn't going to be signing his
I'm sorry.
blanket
Did you see
waiver
the
with nothing.
ESQ mofo?
The guy pissed me off because he was trying to force me to sign documents and basically told me that he was the one who was going to approve or deny our application based on the forms that I submitted. And then I took my forms with me and then I sent them to someone else and I said, actually, you're not. Anyway.
So basically, I need Tabitha with me at all times.
I
Where's my
freaking
law
love you.
certificate? I'd wear a badge.
So I thought going that a little bit, I think people touched a little bit on things. Have there been any like negative impacts to your sharing, like regrets or things you're afraid of? Or I think Jen talked a little about like prejudgments because of her writing when people have found her. Anything like that? Does anyone have any?
Yes, for me, I think, like I mentioned about maybe oversharing too many personal things about her. Yeah, I definitely don't.
I will say, just to jump back to that, because you mentioned that before, Jenny Penny, that you are like kind of cleaning out the old Keeping Up with Kaya archive. You can change the setting to who sees it to only you. So instead of deleting in case you wanted to like look back on that piece, like, I don't know, hitting delete makes my heart break.
Oh, I did this feature.
And
Yeah.
I think that it was a different time. And I think that's what drew a lot of people to you and your page, me included.
Seriously, if you had not cried in your closet,
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Tell
I
her.
cried in my closet. Like I had no filter. I was
But
You
like
had me by the
crazy
soul, and you were
with
speaking
no
to mine.
filter.
I love that.
I don't.
But
think
I
we
feel
found
like it was a
filter.
different time. We didn't
Yeah.
have the same scrutiny coming from all the places that we do now. Autism wasn't real. Like, yeah, it was known, but it wasn't, now it's just like I hate to say it. It's a hot topic. It's a hot topic. People want to identify with it. They want to relate to it. I think it's just different. Like there was just a different type of attention on autism at that time. Now it's like, you're like, oh, should I say it like this? Oh, should I say it like that? You're like literally tripping over your words, which is so frustrating because it's like,
yeah, nonverbal, non-speaking. That's a hot.
or even disability, or they autistic, or with autism, or whatever it is. It kind of changes the thing that people are angry about. I've had people message me and say, oh, you should say different abilities, not disabilities. No, my child has a disability. Not She does have some different abilities as well, but she has a disability. Why am I going to minimize that? What is the point of this fight? Like, now you're trying to take it away, like, and make it like it's really not as bad. Like, it's so incredible. And I just don't really care. I'm going to say what I want to say, and I'm going to put out there what I want to put out there. And too bad if people don't like it. But I also do try to be respectful of people's feelings. I have a lot of autistic adults that are on my page that follow Alyssa, and they kind of give me little tidbits of advice. And in the beginning, I didn't necessarily realize who these people were that were commenting, so I got a little offended. But like now, I can kind of see where it's coming from, and it's not. It's good intentions. They're trying to be helpful, but like I do try to be respectful of knowing that I have a lot of these people following her because she's an autistic adult. So they, a lot of them, I think, relate to her, want to help her, want to encourage her, which is great, which is wonderful. But I hate sitting there worrying about, like, if I say nonverbal or non-speaking, like, what do you care what I call my daughter? Like, so irritating to me. Or if I will say autistic oh, with autism, it's whatever flies out of my mouth. Like, listen, we've been doing this for a long time. We've gone through all these different phases. People were like, what is autism? Does that mean she can paint? Like that's the stuff I got. You know what I mean? So like, I'm grateful that people, it's really on the map now, but it's really frustrating. And it's like, this isn't the point of what I'm writing. It's like you're writing this piece, you're putting your heart and soul into this thing, and then someone like nitpicks this like little line in it. Like that's one of the most frustrating things to me. Like I'm like, do you not read the whole rest of the, because you're being too negative. I don't get it a ton, but I do get it sometimes. I had someone tell me that because you know how you'll be like, well, autism won today, and they're like, no, autism's not a separate entity, or whatever they said. I'm like, okay, like it is to me because I can be mad at autism, and that prevents me from being mad at my daughter. So like, that makes it easier for me to deal with it. But also, it's for me, I have to see the humor in the situation, even when things aren't necessarily funny at the time. They're not funny at all. But then you can, take a step back and make a joke about it, and that's how I process it. That's how I cope with it. So like that's what we do. So but I get a little bit of it, but not too much. Most of it we get mostly positive. So
I do feel like that stuff has calmed down a little. I mean, my page isn't huge, so I've never gotten a huge amount of that stuff. But I do feel like all those controversies, and I don't know if it's just like mood. I know a lot of that stuff happens on TikTok and stuff a lot, and that's really why I don't share on there. I don't think it would be a positive experience for me. I don't think I would want to fight to have to share. Like if I start getting a ton of negative feedback on my page, I'd probably just stop writing. It wouldn't mentally, that would mess with me a lot. But I do feel like it has calmed down with a lot of the stuff that's calmed down since like 2020, a lot of the like, but also maybe it's just like we're in our own area of the internet. I don't know. But I was going to say, Kimmy, that point you brought up when I was talking about the advice thing earlier, I do love the advice from autistic adults. Like I have a few autistic adults who follow my page, and one who I think could be Jesse could be a lot like in some ways. And like, he comments all the time and he's like, oh, try this or try this. And some of the stuff I'm like, oh, I've already tried that. What else can I do? Or I have actually tried things that he's recommended to me and it has helped, or he's just like, made me realize, like, I'll be like, oh, this happened today at this place. And he'll be like, well, it's probably too loud. It's probably too this. I was like, oh yeah, I didn't take those all into consideration. Anyway, that's getting me off topic, but I just thought about that.
I've had people message that they want to date her or like be friends with her,
Jen's the one looking
like,
for it.
I'm like,
Are you
I'm
talking about
still
me?
over here in the top right-hand box. I got nothing.
She has this weird lady in Minnesota who's in love with her. Her name is Rachel Flanagan.
That's true. And here she gets weird.
For me, like again, like my page isn't huge, which I kind of like. I like that I have like my little bubble of people, and I don't get a ton of negative stuff like outside of like spammy stuff. I think like my biggest thing is like within myself of like, I know this isn't a big deal to everyone, and I'm not judging anyone for how they feel about it, but like internet safety. Should I be talking about my kids so much? The stuff Tabs was talking about, we're not in a small town at all. We're in a really big city, but the community now that we've transitioned into like a school that we're in all the time. And so that's kind of like a thing I mess with. I pulled back on like posting so many pictures of my kids and stuff, like things like that, which I have reasons for showing my son. Oh yeah, I do have a stalker named Kim McIsaac who downloads all my kids' pictures. Anyway, when I first started sharing pictures of my son, I was like, okay, I want people to know that autism doesn't have a look, or it can look like anything. But then I also freak out with like AI and creepers out there, because I have had a few of those are like creepy people following us that were like kind of have said things that are weird and things like that. So like that's been like a negative for me in sharing that way. But I haven't had anything where like, I mean, I'm sure some family members maybe on the podcast or on the blog, not that I talk too much about family or anything, but I'm sure there's been times where they're like, ugh, why she have to share about this or that? But they haven't said it to my face, so not my problem.
I always find it remarkable, people behind a keyboard that will like go out of their way to point out to me Kai has gained weight. Like,
oh, the weight thing. It's
I'm not mind. I'm very well aware. And also, people, please don't tell me to turn the iPad off at night, because it's not going to make a difference. Okay, can we just not? So I'll like literally be like, don't come at me for the iPad, because it's the iPad and what was the other one I said? iPad.
Wait.
And
I mean, just get out, go in a hole.
Yeah. Don't
go
even think about a child's weight. Don't even think about that. Like I would never even.
I was reading
it makes me
story spelling. a couple of her kids are overweight, and people are and they're just little kids. Like, and because of who, I mean, it's not even, I mean, obviously she's a public figure. She's got a lot of pictures of her children on the internet, but people are just, these kids are old enough to read this stuff. Like, it's really mean stuff towards kids.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
and mine wasn't so much. I've gotten comments time and again, but like it's very relatively like not very often. And this isn't a slew of like 58 positive comments. You might get one that's like not necessarily mean, but like condescending. But we did a reel that got like, I don't know if it got like almost 2 million views in that because it went around to so many people. And it was something like, reach your hand out to your child and see what they do. And there's like a song that plays in the background, and she was eating ice cream, and she like thought I wanted a bite of her ice cream, so she went to like share it. It was just a really sweet video. But then once it started really going to a lot of people, everyone's like, "Oh, she shouldn't be eating ice cream," and "Oh, you should really put her on a diet." And then it was that, and then the comments about like, "Oh, you really need to organize your house better," and like it's
Yeah.
just people. I
It's
I feel like
cheap shots
you
people
can't.
take. It's pretty
But
wild.
that because that one had such a far reach, I think that was why there was so many. I mean, still, it wasn't a ton of negative stuff, but it was like, but it's the same thing, Jen, the weight thing. It's like,
First of all, it's like I'm aware. Thanks. Thanks.
yeah, and there's a lot of things that go behind it. Like, there's a
And
lot of things
also
that
like
are,
the weight. Yeah, I'm choosing that over
Yeah.
seeing her ribs.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm choosing that. I'm choosing that over seizures. F right off.
well, yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, it could be medication. It could be that they're a lot of our kids
It
have
could be
different
none of your
metabolisms.
business.
None of your
They're
business.
the way they eat,
It could for
it's
sure be
just,
none of your business.
yeah. And I like me and my husband definitely recognize that sometimes we should probably not let her have so much junk, but it gives her so much joy. It's like she doesn't have a lot of things that give her joy in her life. So it's like I'm not gonna sit there and let
Listen,
her
the fact
do it
that your daughter, I've listened while she, listen, Neil says, I'm going to the store. Do you want anything? You ask Lou. And she works so hard to communicate what she wants. Like right now, it isn't like, do you want a candy bar? Yes or no hand. It's like she will do what she needs to do to tell you that it's chips, that she wants the orange ones, and that it's Doritos. Like she is so clear, and it takes so much work. And that's actually her own desire for the first time in 22 years, 26 years. Like she's asking for what she goddamn wants. Yes, you can have those chips, girl.
And she did it the other day. Neil was leaving, and I said, "Do you want Daddy to bring you something back?" And she just kind of looks at you, and I go, "A treat," and she nods, and I'm like, "Okay, what do you want now?" This is not like this is like you doing an equation in your head, like her being able to retrieve a word without a visual. It's extremely, extremely difficult for her to do. And you can see her, the concentration, she's looking up. It's like it's taking her like a full minute. And sometimes I'll step in and be like, "Do you want candy or chips?" and kind of just help her narrow it down. But I do like to challenge her. And she said muffin, but I didn't quite understand her. And I said, "Did she just say pumpkin?" And then she pointed to the cabinet where when we do have mini muffins, that's where they go. And she said muffin. And I go, "Oh, you want a muffin?" And she signed yes. And I'm like, "Okay, do you want blueberry or chocolate chip?" Because I still wasn't convinced that I understood her correctly. And she kind of said chocolate chip and pointed to my hand. And yep, she knew what she wanted. She wanted a chocolate chip muffin, which is great. This is what I want for her. I want her to be able to express what she wants because we always assume she wants the same thing because she like picks the same things, but she doesn't have the ability to voice her differences. Like, sometimes you
And
feel like a
without
Kit Kat,
being like, without
sometimes you feel
having a
like almond joy,
cage.
sometimes you feel like a mountain style. Like, I don't know.
Sometimes it's a nut, isn't it?
Sometimes
Yeah,
it's not.
sometimes
Sometimes
Yeah.
you
you
feel like a
feel
nut,
like a nut,
sometimes you
sometimes
don't.
you
You don't.
don't.
Yeah,
Almond
there it
joys
is.
got
Joe's got
nuts,
nuts. Mounds
moms
don't.
don't.
I love
We gotta
us.
get a record deal, ladies. I can feel it going.
We're
The
definitely
thing
gonna.
of it is, like, because we all have pages, we all have this community that can celebrate the goddamn chips. You can celebrate it. And, like you guys have said, and we've heard from all of our guests this series, the processing that happens, the validation that happens, the like therapeutic parts of it for yourself, we highly recommend. Even if this is a creative writing journal that you have that is not a public page that lets you let it out or like get it out of your heart and soul and organize it, do it. But we all do this because what is it, Kim? Advocate, educate, and celebrate.
Relate.
relate.
The
Ooh,
celebrate
ooh,
could be
ooh,
added
ooh.
right to that. There you go.
Yeah.
Rachel.
All right, chorus number
Celebrate.
4.
Yeah, all right. I'm gonna go put
I
that
don't
in
know
there
what
and have
music.
Jamie add that in like it was me.
Mhm, mhm. Well, anyways, you guys, that's why we share. We challenge
All
you
I
to
hear
share.
is,
If you do,
"I feel like a nut."
come find us on the Facebook and like us so we follow you.
And you know what? And if you want to share but you're shy and you don't want to put your child out there, yourself out there, like message us, email us. We can send us a voice recording. We can put you on anonymous. We can
Yeah,
yeah,
Hmm.
you can share your stuff that way.
I loved that anonymous storytellers we did. We would
The
love
other
more.
thing too is if you see it, one of our piece of writing or one of our friends or somebody that you've followed that you've heard on the page, share their pieces if something resonates with you because like if your voice shakes when you talk, but something feels like it sings to your heart song that Jen wrote, then share it because it at least would let the people know what you're dealing with. I mean, it's important.
Hey, we just wanted to mention everyone's pages and where you can find us on the internet. Rachel Flanagan, where can we come? Can I buy a vowel, please?
Yes,
Rachel
you can.
Flanagan, where can we find you?
My page on Facebook is Flanaville. I'm no longer on the Instagrams. And you can find me right here at the table for 5. Just Flanaville and table for 5.
Give me McIsaac. Where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Facebook. It's Autism Adventures with Alyssa. We have the Instagram with the same name. I also have a TikTok that is Kimberly Writes if you want to follow my writing journey. That's not related to autism.
Sounds
And I
very
do have a
serious.
blog on the internet somewhere, Autism Adventures with Alyssa.
Me,
Cabs, what about you?
Piece of Autism, Facebook, Instagram, and my website is pieceofautism.com. Children's books you can find on Amazon under Spectacular Spectrum Books. There's 5 of them, one in Espanol. Go check that out too over on the Amazon.
Jen?
And then I'll go for Jamie.
Yeah.
And then Jen, you can finish this up. Jamie's page is Jamie Ramos Writes on Facebook and Instagram. And she has a website at the same name. She'll edit that out if that's not true. Okay, Jenny Penny, go.
You can find me on Facebook at Keeping Up with Kaya. Instagram, it was taken, so it's keeping up with _Kaya. My website is keepingupwithkaya.com. Yeah, that's where you can find us. So thank you for joining us. And we
Oh,
will
and we might as well mention our handles while we're doing all this, which is we have Table for 5 podcast on Facebook, on Instagram, and we also have Table for 5 podcast on TikTok. So you can find us in all those places.
And as always, we're as organized every Monday. So join us next time at the table.
And
Mhm.
if you want to
Everyone.
support us, join as a subscriber and you'll get extra content.
Yes,
That's a new
It's
thing.
so
That's
good.
a
Just
new thing.
released our first video into our subscriber group. It's hilarious. It's an unedited, uncut
Hilarious.
video of us before we start recording. I mean, you guys don't even know. Bloopers doesn't even cover it.
No.
So yeah, you can check that out. It's only $2.99 a month. So there'll be a link somewhere for that, I'm assuming.
It's in our podcast description. The link is in the podcast description.
Okay, listen, should we say
What
goodbye
she
for
said.
the 54th time?
Yeah. So for the last time, thank you for joining us.
I thought we already did.
And
Thanks, everybody.
have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us at the table for this episode of the Table for 5 No Reservations podcast. If you are enjoying the podcast, please remember to rate and review us wherever you're listening. If you'd love more content from us and to be part of our community, make sure to become a subscriber. You can find the link in the description of this episode. Join us next Monday for more, and while you wait, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. See you next time.